Hey everyone, if you like the Roast West Coast Coffee podcast, you might also appreciate the I Like Beer the podcast. Listening to these guys is like being a fly on the wall of the pub with a few of your favorite mates having a pint. These professional beer appreciators have plenty of stories to share on everything from the mating habits of penguins to their behind-the-scenes brewery experiences. Check out the I Like Beer the podcast wherever you are listening to this show about coffee, or head to ilikebeerthepodcast.com. Hey, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Season 4, Episode 19 of the Roast West Coast Coffee Podcast. I'm Ryan Wolt, and this is the show where I bring you the stories of coffee professionals, entrepreneurship, and coffee education. This is a special episode because it is the first with Jared Hales stepping in as a Coffee Smarter expert. He was a guest on this show talking about the green coffee company he co-founded with several members of his family in Anaheim, California, called Haseya Coffee Source. Jared also teaches coffee education classes, and I thought his perspective as a buyer and a broker of green coffee would make him someone we could all learn from, and for some interesting coffee conversation. I wasn't wrong. For this first show, we're talking about green coffee for beginners. Throughout the conversation, we waffle a bit on whether we're discussing green coffee for at-home or commercial roasters, but most of the information works for both. I assume that anyone looking into buying green coffee already has more than a casual interest in the process of coffee roasting. Otherwise, why would you be buying? Jared points out that for most roasters, especially beginning or home roasters, part of the appeal is the process, the effort, the learning, everything needed to achieve the perfect roast. That is a challenge that seems to live on the horizon of attainability. If you haven't done it already, now would be a good time to make sure that your coffee mug is full. And if it already is, please take a moment to head to roastwestcoast.com to sign up for this show's newsletter. If you do, you'll get this podcast, show recaps, coffee news, coffee education, and updates from our roast partners sent to you in an email every single week. Here at Roast West Coast headquarters, I just hit the little tab handle on my hot water kettle, and I'm going to let myself watch the water boil while I'm hand grinding some coffee beans from Zumbar Coffee and Tea. It sounds almost as zen as I'm sure it will feel. While I'm doing that, please enjoy this Coffee Smarter conversation with Jared Hales of Haseya Coffee Source on the Roast West Coast Coffee Podcast. Make sure everything's good. Yeah, I'm doing good. I have been out of coffee for a few days, trying to hold off on going and buying stuff because I have stuff on order.
Mm-hmm.
Today I caved and I opened up one of these single-use camping coffees that I had.
Like a bag or?
Yeah, kind of like a tea. It's like the one where you pour over, but it's same concept.
Gotcha.
And I don't know if it's just because I've been away from it for a couple days or not, but it's not the worst coffee. It's not. I'm enjoying it. How about you? What are you drinking today? Anything?
Today I'm drinking, it's a Pacamara Natural from El Salvador, roasted by Lockwood Roasting he's in San Diego, I think.
What does Pacamara mean?
Pacamara is a variety of Arabica. So, just like Caturra, Bourbon, these are all varieties of the Arabica plant. So Pacamara is a pretty unique one. The beans are huge. They're sometimes 3 times larger than some of the other Arabica varieties. And they roast weird and they look weird. And they kind of taste weird too.
Does that mean they have 3 times more flavor, or is it more of I'm just showing you the big size of my beans sort of situation?
It's kind of just a big size thing. It's weird. It obviously affects, in a pound of coffee, you have totally different bean count. And then when you're roasting it, it's just so strange. It affects the density measurements,
I was just totally distracted when you said that. So you roughly know how many beans are in a bag of coffee?
No, I do not.
I've
done that math before. But
I should do that, like the jelly bean thing, where guess
uh
how many jelly
right.
beans are in a jar. I'd be curious to know. Although that makes sense. It would change if it's a larger size bean.
I mean, if we really wanted to, we could do that math.
You're smarter than me because you'd be like, well, let's just figure it out on paper. And I'd be like, well, let's start counting. One, two, oh, shoot. Where was I? One,
Right,
let's start over again.
right.
Well, Jared, I appreciate you coming back to the Roast West Coast Coffee Podcast.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
As a coffee expert this time, which I really appreciate, to get a different perspective. Your role as a buyer and a broker and your experience is different from any of the other experts we've had on the show, who've only been on the kind of roasting shop buying side. The reason that I asked you to come back is because of that different experience. And I really wanted to start kind of at the beginning and ask you about buying green coffee for someone who is a beginner, not necessarily a beginning buyer, but say a beginning roaster. Like either I'm
Right,
getting interested in roasting coffee for myself, and I'll kind of let you make the distinction between like an at-home consumer roaster versus say someone who's thinking about opening a cafe.
right.
But in my head, I have not been to your warehouse in Anaheim, or your shop in Anaheim, but I imagine it kind of like a Costco style grocery store where I can walk around picking out beans. But I'll let you kind of describe that and kind of let us know where we start in that process and what we're kind of looking for in a green coffee bean as a beginner.
Right. That's a good big question, right? And at its very core, it's a lot like picking a roasted coffee bean. There are so many different options. Not only just roast profile, but like what variety do you buy? Do you buy that Pacamara, or do you buy the Caturra, or do you buy the washed process or the natural process coffee? And so it really starts with kind of preference, honestly. And not to make it as complicated as it could possibly be, but it is. There's every combination. So when we get to talk to fresh roasters, green roasters, it's kind of like if we have the opportunity, kind of a discussion. Our warehouse is definitely not like you just start picking stuff off the shelf. Definitely not. Everything we like bag it up and basically to order. So and that comes, if we have the opportunity to talk to someone in person, it comes from a lot of questions. Do you like these flavors? Do you like these flavors? So it's a lot of preference mixed with kind of matching that to what we have available. Now, when you're on our website, that's a little bit harder to do, right? Because there's that conversation isn't there. So that's kind of a challenge that we've had to figure out as we grow the website business, is how to effectively communicate what this coffee tastes like so that somebody can match that to their preference. You know what I mean? So for example, we do all the tasting notes on the coffee, and we try to keep these fairly I don't fairly direct, nothing too crazy as far as like descriptors. We try to stay within the SCA flavor wheel so that these are words that people are more familiar with, and so they can identify like, oh, I've tasted that before, I like that, or I don't like that. And then on top of that, we've discussed adding like cupping videos, essentially just us taking a quick snapshot of the coffee. We use the SCA cupping form on all of our coffees, so we go through fragrance and aroma, flavor, aftertaste, acidity, body, balance. All these things kind of create a snapshot of what the coffee might look like. And so, kind of directly what you're asking about, how do we communicate to somebody that they're going to like or not like this coffee? I think a video is the next best thing if you can't have a conversation with that person, right?
Sure.
But definitely the the most die-hard coffee roasters or home roasters, they will shoot us an email or give us a call before they check out. They're like, they know what to ask and they know what they like. Those are almost easier though, right? Because then you can just pair them up with the right coffee.
Right. I'm thinking about the buyer, like let's just say it's a home roaster, and you were talking about keeping things on the flavor wheel so they have that frame of reference.
Right.
But there is, I guess, I suppose, an assumption that if somebody is at the point where they're buying green coffee, they're kind of into coffee. They understand what that is. They're not just someone who
True.
woke up one day and was like, you know what I'm going to do today? Roast coffee. Although I would imagine there are people that do that and who really come to you just totally green, to use a pun on words there a little bit.
Uh-huh.
But let's say that I am interested or I am looking online. Do you suggest or recommend people to start with small amounts of coffee as samples? Or do you see that process playing out, especially with the home roaster who's trying to figure out what they can and can't do? Because
Right.
I'm thinking about it just as when I go and buy a bag of coffee from somebody local, this just happened to me. I bought a bag of coffee from Lofty that I had there that I really liked, and I just could not replicate that at home with the setup that I have.
With
So,
brewing, you mean?
right, with brewing. So I would
Understood.
imagine it's similar with green coffee, where everybody's roasting education and skills and technique is going to be different. So you're kind of trying to give them this thing and give them like, hey, here's like best case scenario,
Right.
but it's kind of on you to get there.
That's true. That is true. But that's, especially in the home roasting world, I think part of the attraction, is like the process and the learning, right? I mean, even me, I'm always kind of surprised by certain things that I encounter in roasting, where I don't know, maybe your roast graph, if you're using a data logger, doesn't look how you wanted it to or expected it to, and then you taste the coffee and it's really good, or vice versa. Maybe you're like, yeah, I nailed it, and then you taste it and it's lacking. I think that's just kind of the constant evolution of the coffee roaster and the coffee experience. So everybody has different machinery at home, right? And they're roasting. Some people are roasting on modified barbecue. Some people are roasting on really nice, well-built tabletop machines. Some people are roasting in air roasters like Fluid Bed, basically really nice popcorn poppers that are made for coffee roasting. So it's hard to say like a blanket statement on like roast the coffee this way. And you'll see if you did look on some of the coffees that we list, we have some suggestions, but again, they're more like big picture. Roast this medium to medium light, so that you can pull out these flavors. What that actually looks like on somebody's machine, I have no idea really without actually using it. But then still, there's so much room for preference in there. Maybe somebody likes those coffees darker or whatnot. And again, that's just more to the point of like the more information that you have as a home roaster, the better you can kind of make those decisions on what coffees to pick up for your preferences. You made a point of like, should someone be sampling a lot? Absolutely, right? But at the same time, I see a lot of people they buy like 1 pound of 20 different coffees. And any roaster would know that it takes you more than a couple of tries to really dial in a roast, especially like even when you really know your machine, it takes some time and a couple of, tweaks and tastes and tweak and taste. And so I think that home roasters sometimes make the mistake of buying too few pounds of coffee, and they kind of never get it dialed in before they move on to the next one. So there's a balance of like getting to know that specific bean, and then maybe using the information that is provided about like elevation, variety, density, moisture, and trying to create these trends in your memory of like, I like coffees that are like this, right? Which I don't know if you do this, but even with tasting, if you're just a taster, right? Do you keep a log of coffees that you try and how you like them or don't like them? Do you just have a
Uh,
great memory?
yes, I have a very good memory. No, I have no memory. I am someone who tries to keep a log of things. I'm not great. I usually peter out after, I forget. I'll end up writing notes about every third. And
Mm,
just me being me, like I'm more interested in I'm more willing to take the coffee at face value wherever I go, and I'm more interested in I end up my notes are generally about the place itself because I'm more like
hmm.
coming from that side. I used to be the person creating the atmosphere. That's the
Right.
part that I get really jazzed about. Like I know that I'm not roasting coffee. I'm just more about enjoying it and appreciating it. But I do see that. I see that especially when I stop into like a roast day somewhere, say at Coffee Cycle or wherever, and every time like they have a roast come out, there's like this moment where everyone sits down and they're like writing notes in their little notepad, and if you look at it,
Hmm.
it looks like something you picked up in the bunker on Lost. I don't really understand what any of it means, but they seem to know what it means, and I think that's
Right.
that's the important part. When somebody is holding, or let's say you take a scoop of green beans in your hand, we're talking about you're providing them with a bunch of information. They might be looking at it online or seeing a video of a tasting or doing a cupping. But when you're looking at those physical beans, can you see defects of a sort in there? Do you, as that middle person, do you have to sort stuff out?
Right.
I know a lot of roasters who have destoners, and so there's still things that are going to come through where a stone might get thrown in with a bag of beans, which could
Yes.
really mess up your grinder. So you don't want that. But if you were to take a scoop of green beans, can you look at them and be like, oh, you know what, that bean's not great, or is it more of a batch system?
In a very broad sense, somewhat. But I've been fortunate. I've been scooping beans for home roasters for like 8 years, So I don't even know, but maybe have scooped 1,000 different coffees, right? And have like handled that green product on all these coffees that I'm also tasting on the regular. And so there's definitely some like indicators of good and less than good coffee. Defects are the most obvious one. You can see physical defects like insect damage. There are beans that we call like full sour or full black, where basically they got over fermented. Have you ever eaten a handful of peanuts and there was like a black peanut in there that somehow missed the quality check?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's kind of like that, where it's just, they are pretty gnarly to accidentally consume. So you can see these obvious ones, but beyond that, like, to use specialty coffee terms, an 88-point coffee doesn't look that much different than an 85-point coffee, meaning like a really good coffee doesn't look that much different than the best coffee in the world, as like physically. So you can't really take it all at face value. But at the same time, we do have a physical grading on every coffee that we bring in, and mostly it's just to check the coffee against the contract terms. There's a lot of like grading systems internationally for exporting and importing the coffee. There's no real, I guess, system of arbitration for like specialty coffee, right? Like specialty coffee, as much as we love it, it doesn't really mean that much. It's kind of like, is this coffee that people prefer to drink? But it's hard to quantify that in like a contract, So a lot of contracts will be, we have obviously tasted the coffee several times and approved all the samples and everything, but the contract comes down to, okay, this coffee cannot have more or less of these defects. And so when we get the coffee, we check all the physical aspects to make sure that we're all in spec, and it always is, really. But that happens in the milling and the preparation and the sorting, rather than anything that we do. It would be really difficult to do that here.
As you're talking, I'm thinking about the process of the green coffee being transported and then you potentially checking it for defects, which obviously you're not going to check every bean in a cargo, box
Right.
for perfection or against the contract. You're essentially pulling samples. I think I understand this right. So correct me if I'm wrong. When that cargo box, that 42,000 roughly pounds, I think is the number of
Yep.
coffee, leaves a port somewhere, leaves a farm, gets on a ship, and is on the water floating. If something happens to that green coffee between there and you, say moisture, water damage,
Hmm.
insect, something, who
Hmm.
is responsible in that window?
Unfortunately, yes.
Really? Yeah, so you're on the hook no matter what.
Yeah, most of the contracts are under terms what we call FOB, which is free on board. So the exporter is responsible for it all the way up until it's on the boat, and then once it's on the boat, the importer is responsible for it. So, obviously you have insurance. I've never seen personally anything really bad happen in transit, thankfully. I have had coffee show up different from what I approved, but it didn't happen in transit. It happened somewhere in the milling and the sorting. But yeah, I mean, we use Grain Pro liners, which are like a food grade plastic liner inside of the burlap sack to protect against moisture, and it really does a lot, honestly. There are even other solutions like you can line the entire container with this plastic barrier, for further protection. I haven't tried those just because the bags are already in, or each sack is already in a liner. But there are definitely solutions out there to try to minimize that risk.
You already answered my question, which is kind of a weird bummer, but I was going to ask if any of your ships had ever been attacked by pirates. But instead, I'll kind of close this Coffee Smarter session out with, if I am the buyer, if I am that person coming to you, what sort of questions should I be asking you as the person selling this green coffee to me to ensure that, one, we are starting our relationship out right, but two, that, like, let's say someone's not going to you, they're going to go to another broker, they're based out of Portland or Wisconsin or
Mhm.
wherever. What should they be asking their local green coffee seller to kind of make sure that they're on board or that they're getting a good product?
For me, it's really about the flavor profile. If it's in a commercial setting, you have the price aspect, but I'm not sure that's what you're asking here. But as far as looking for the right bean for your menu, it comes down to flavor, right? Making sure that whatever your intention is with that coffee, whether it's just to enjoy it or to sell it, it's what you're actually looking for. Because most roasters, they have a range of coffees on their menu, right? Why? Really, it's to hit different preferences. You have different roast levels, you have different types of coffee. I can't think of any roasters off the top of my head that feature less than three coffees at a time. So being able to communicate that way, and then ultimately at any level, you still have to taste the coffee and confirm that it's the right fit for you. Especially if you're a commercial roaster and looking to resell this coffee, you have to taste it. You have to get a sample. I'm pretty fortunate where I get to a level with a lot of our clients where I can make recommendations kind of blindly for them. I'm saying that like they've never tasted the coffee, they'll still order it. Those are kind of the most fun, but also the most scary because you're waiting for the coffee to show up and for them to say, I like it. So I'm like calling them every week. Did you try that yet? Did you try that yet? But yeah, we get to that level of trust where I know their preference and they can count on me to fulfill it. But that takes a lot of what I'm talking about. It takes a lot of like, hey, I'm looking for this. Okay, I have these options. Let me send them to you. You need to taste them. You need to give me feedback, and we create kind of that rapport or that language back and forth.
I thought of one more question while you were talking, which is, and this is kind of more specifically for a consumer level roaster. If I were to say buy 5 pounds of coffee from you, obviously I'm not going to go through 5 pounds of coffee in a day or a week, maybe even
Hmm.
in a short time, the way I would if I were a roaster, like a commercial roaster testing and selling and that sort of thing. When you sell that green coffee, kind of what is the lifespan of that green coffee? How long does it last before it's really kind of not in that window? I know, like, if you buy roasted beans, obviously there's a specific kind of flavor window
Right.
that they hit for brewed or espresso and so on. But how is that different for green coffee?
It's a great question.
Like, could I throw it in a cabinet for, a week or a month or a year?
Yeah, great question. As you probably know, and probably a lot of your listeners know, most places that grow coffee in the world, they only get one harvest. So you only have one chance to pick the coffee, process the coffee, dry the coffee, ship it, right? So let's say you really love that coffee from Mexico, it happened one time. It only happened one time in a year, and you got to wait next year. So what we consider to be old green coffee is any coffee that's left over by the next harvest cycle. So usually we use this term past crop. So that coffee becomes past crop when the new crop is now available, right? This doesn't actually mean that the coffee spoils or goes bad or anything like that. So what I've noticed is a nicely processed coffee, dried correctly and handled properly, shipped in these Grain Pro liners, stored. California is actually pretty nice for coffee storage, right? It's pretty mild temperatures here and mild humidity. So if it's stored well, it has all these factors in its favor, it can last easily 6 months to a year, no problem. I've seen coffees last 3 years and taste great. I've seen coffees last 3 months. So it really comes down to how they're handled. But for the most part, in general, I would say after 6 months, you start to notice the coffee kind of falling off. Like, I say falling off, I mean lacking some of the pop that it maybe had when it first got there. And really, you can only notice it because I've been tasting it for months, So for me, sometimes when we're offering coffees when they're like 10 months old, I'm starting to notice that the coffee is losing a lot of its pop. It starts to get, we describe it as aged, and that kind of tastes almost papery, or in the worst case, like baggy, like burlap kind of flavor, not a pleasant taste. So maybe I'm getting hints of these flavors, but when I'm with clients, they're like, "Oh, these coffees are great," and I'm realizing that I'm only noticing this change because I've been tasting it for once a week for the last 30 weeks or whatever. So it really comes down to the specific coffee and how it'll age. If it's stored well, it should last 6 months to a year, no problem.
God, you must drink so much coffee if you're sampling coffees like on a regular basis. Like honestly, I feel like you should start wearing like a heart monitor or something just to see how it's impacting you.
I honestly try not to drink coffee that much. To like that might be a sin here, but I have to definitely regulate. I spit it out, and gotta be careful.
Ooh, that's gonna lead me down a whole nother path. So I'm gonna cut that off. Not the spitting out, but just like it's like same with food. Like, and this is something I think about. Like, if let's say like I take a peanut butter cup and I chew on it, but then I spit it out, am I still eating a peanut butter cup? Like, am I
Oh
still
man,
responsible for those calories? It could be the same with coffee and caffeine, right?
I like it. Am I responsible for that caffeine?
Do I have to put that down in my little food diary? I don't know. Jared, I really appreciate you spending some time with us, and I hope you'll spend some more time with us as a coffee expert. I think there's
Sure
just
thing.
a really unique perspective that you have, and I'm looking forward to talking to you again soon.
Thanks for having me, Ryan.
To recap, visually, there's not much difference between good green coffee and what will turn out to be great green coffee. You can't stare at a handful of green beans and know that they will turn out to be an 80 or 90 point coffee merely through the act of looking. Those changes will only be made known through the roasting process and discovered during cuppings at the tasting table, and through roasting and brewing that same coffee time and time again to ensure that you've found the sweet spot. It is important to take that time to dial in the roast of green coffee, and realistically, you'll need more than one small sample. Jared noted that the best results came when roasters would work out the kinks on a single coffee instead of trying to hit a home run on the very first try on a bunch of different coffees. Tweak and taste, tweak and taste. It should also be noted that as of this podcast, none of Hasea's coffee shipments have ever been attacked by pirates while crossing the waterways to America. Jared and I also covered the lifespan of green coffee, which gave us a new coffee vocab term, past crop. A crop becomes old or past crop when a new crop of coffee beans, which turn over once annually, becomes available. That gives a green coffee bean roughly a 1-year lifespan. But storage is the key. A bag of green coffee beans in a sealed Grain Pro bag in a climate-controlled room will retain its pop, its essence, longer than beans stored in a burlap sack, left on the floor in the back of a warehouse, where the sun might shine directly onto it through a skylight some afternoons, and rain leaks in on the others. Generally speaking, after about 6 months, green coffee may start to fade a little bit. But that doesn't mean the coffee has gone bad. It just isn't at the peak of its potential. And realistically, it may only be noticeable if you've been tasting that particular batch periodically. Again, how it is being stored matters, and that is a great question for you to ask if you're buying green coffee from a new-to-you green coffee broker, like Hasea Coffee Source. So, I don't know about you, but I think that was a pretty successful Coffee Smarter session. Thanks to Jared for coming back on the show. I've already booked him for one more episode, where we are going to dig into the extraction of coffee flavor. So get excited about that. If you want to learn more about green coffee, more about Jared, or what Hasea Coffee Source can do for an aspiring or established coffee roaster, head to HaseaCoffee.com or follow their Instagram @HaseaCoffee. Jared regularly offers coffee education classes that are pretty comprehensive. You can see the upcoming class schedule on their website, and of course I'll link to it in this show's notes and again on roastwestcoast.com. Because if I don't ask you at least twice per podcast to go to the website, I mean, what am I even doing here? Next week is the final week of Season 4. It came really fast. I was actually surprised when I looked at the calendar, and I'm the one creating this show. In addition to that Coffee Smarter Extraction episode, I'll bring you an interview with Kevin Shin and Jason Walker of North County Roastery, which can be found at the Finn Hotel in Oceanside, California. As we close out today, I want to thank you for listening and for supporting your local coffee roasters, your favorite local coffee shops, and for tipping your baristas. I made up some Tip Your Barista stickers, which are for sale online, and for everyone that sells, I'll be tipping a barista. Thanks for helping me put some money into the pockets of workers who have always been essential. Also, big thanks and a shout out to this show's industry partners, including Mostra Coffee Company. Mostra's Director of Coffee, Ryan Sullivan, is competing in the United States Cup Tasters Championships this week, where he'll be tested on his ability to taste, smell, concentrate, and recall variations in coffee. It's a big deal, and we're wishing him the best of luck. As we are to Mostra's head coffee roaster, Nick Berardi, who will be competing in the United States Roaster Championship, where competitors grade coffee, make roast plans, and then literally roast coffee on site. It's a very cool experience, and I'm looking forward to hearing how they do. Thank you to Cafe Laterre, Leap Coffee, Maria Coffee, Steady State Coffee Roasting, Coffee Cycle Roasting, Camp Coffee Company, Cape Horn Coffee Importers, First Light Whiskey, Zumbar Coffee and Tea, and Ignite Coffee Company. That Zumbar coffee I was brewing at the top was a Hummingbird blend, which is a staple in this household, and I brewed it in a French press. It was quite comforting. Links to all of those great roasters are right there on the front page of this show's newsletter at roastwestcoast.com. That's 3 times. And if you have a question you want answered on a future episode of Coffee Smarter, hit me up on Instagram at roastwestcoast. This episode of the Roast West Coast Coffee Podcast has been written, produced, and recorded by me, Ryan Wolt. I hope this show has found you happy, healthy, and with at least enough sanity and coffee to make it through the day. And please, always tip your baristas and be sure to drink good coffee.